Hi everyone, Jordan Liker here with my review of the special education interviews. In this process I interviewed 3 people from 3 different districts. The first was a para from my current middle school. The second was a special education teacher from a nearby district. She was taught at the high school level. And the third was the administrator. He was a former principal of mine at a previous district. When asked about the child find procedures that they're aware of, the para, he said he really didn't know much about them or really even what they were or hadn't really heard about them actually. And so he really didn't know too much about them. He said basically that the SPED teacher would inform him of what he needed to know usually, and that's kind of how his job worked usually. The SPED teacher, she said basically perform more at the preschool and elementary level. She really doesn't have much to do with them. She doesn't really isn't a part of the testing procedures or screening procedures. She did used to work at the grade school level as a special education teacher, and she said even then she didn't really have much to do with the child find procedures. They would consult her kind of on an as-needed basis, but overall she really didn't have much to do with it. The administrator said that the district did screenings, and they advertised for screenings in their district, usually with the preschool kindergarten age. They did these screenings. They worked with organizations like Parents as Teachers to identify kids and with potential deficiencies. He indicated that the sooner they find these kids with the deficiencies or potential deficiencies and started working with them, the better success rate they would have and the easier it is to correct those deficiencies. They also worked with daycare providers kind of in the same capacity, as well as Head Start, and then later classroom teachers. And they could determine if students needed to progress to special ed testing. What do they find the most challenging part of their jobs? The paraprofessional said the most challenging part for him is the professional staff, in which he meant the regular ed teachers, misunderstanding and losing their patience with kids. He said you'd have some kids that when they were misunderstood and teachers lost patience with them, that they might shut down. In other words, they just didn't want to work or do much of anything. And if it happened early in the day, maybe the entire day, it was hard to get them focused and back on track. And so they might waste an entire day where they didn't progress on their goals at all. The SPED teacher said just the most challenging part is the paperwork. There's just not enough time, and the amount of paperwork that they have to do. They're constantly interrupted during the day, and so just finding time during the day is almost impossible. And so most of this paperwork happens outside of the regular school day. And she said it just can be overwhelming sometimes. In the past, she's had situations where she's had caseloads of maybe like 25 kids per year, and just the amount of paperwork for all those kids all the time. So it's just it's daunting and hard to get it all accomplished. The administrator said one of the hardest parts is getting all educators to realize that SPED students, they may look like they're not trying, or they're lazy, or they're just trying to get under the teacher's skin, but it's because of a disability that they have. To get them to realize it's because of their disability of why they're struggling, and to get teachers and paras to realize that the goal is to correct the deficiencies that a student may have, and not just to make it easier, not just to water down the curriculum and where they can get the student through and just push them through and get them through school, but to actually correct those deficiencies. That's the goal that they want to do. It helps that student later in life. The most rewarding part of their jobs, they all had really similar answers here. A lot of it was just being able to see that kind of light bulb moment, or that the progression that a student has made, to see them progress, to see the joy in the student's eyes and behavior when they get that feeling of accomplishment about themselves. You get to see them change. You get to see these kids change. A lot of them, especially the administrator, mentioned that they play a role in making a difference in the lives of these kids, and sometimes play a role in improving their life compared to their parents or their grandparents, and making their future lives better. And so just being able to play that role and helping them out is fulfilling for these individuals. And the advice that they have for the supervision of the special education staff, the para indicated that he thought more training is definitely needed. He said that in his training, it lasted about a day, and it consisted of a few videos that he watched, and they were over different areas of special education, but they didn't have time to watch every video that they had, so he just picked a couple and he watched them himself in a room, in the special ed room in the back room. So he just picked a few and he watched those, and that was his overall training for special ed. So he said they need more context of how to deal with kids, maybe some more education of how their strategies to use, teaching methods. He said the training that is currently in place isn't all that beneficial. And I know personally that I sometimes feel overwhelmed with the education of some special ed kids. I mean, what strategies am I going to use? And I don't know exactly what to do either. And I've had a lot more training than what the paras have. And so I can only imagine that they're feeling even more overwhelmed at times. The SPED teacher, in regards to like the paras that she works with, she talked a lot about to make them feel a valued member of the team and to be supportive of him. She said that throughout almost every year there are instances that happen that she could probably fire every para that she has because of certain things that happen. But she also has to constantly kind of remember that paras really don't get paid all that much. And she said that every one of her paras could go to Walmart and make more money than what they make working as paras at the school. And so she talked a lot about helping them learn from mistakes, and so they can do a better job in the future. But being always supportive of them, because she said they're extremely hard to find, or they're extremely hard to find for, and you don't want them to quit on you either. And she said an important thing to remember for all levels is to be aware that the job that an individual is doing at any given moment may be the hardest job in the school. So whether that be a para, a teacher, or an administrator, at a given moment they may have the hardest job of anybody in that school. And so just to be supportive of them and understanding of that. The administrator, he indicated that you always need to maintain high expectations for the job that they do. Again, to be supportive of them, help them out, help them learn. Mistakes are going to happen. He said mistakes are going to be made by everyone, and so the important thing is to learn from those mistakes so they don't happen again. So correct those so in the future those mistakes aren't made. How do they effectively work with parents? The para said he didn't really work with parents much. He said he's been a para for about a year, and that in that time he's really only met one parent, and that was just when they came to pick up the student from school early. And so, but he thought, just trying to understand the life and experiences of the student and the student's families. They come from sometimes very different backgrounds, he said. And so just trying to understand where they're coming from can go a large part in forming those relationships with them. The SPED teacher said communication is key, and she likes to communicate in a way that's familiar with the parents. And a lot of times this is texting. She said it can be hard sometimes though, because with texting she's doing it from her own personal phone. But she also said that in her experience working with special education students and parents, that a lot of times the parents either don't have email or don't check the email, and a lot of times if they get a phone call that's from the school, they're used to it being bad news, and so they just don't answer those phone calls. And so, but if she texts them from her phone, they'll usually respond to those, and they can get some communication going between her and the parents. She says it's important to realize that for the most part, it's probably going to take more time and effort engaging those parents of special ed students than it is regular ed students. She always likes to keep accurate records of when she contacted them, what she said, and she always wants to make sure and praise for something that they're doing right. Um, she said a lot of these parents either had to fight really hard to get their kids in special education. They've been told a long time through the school system of what is wrong and what they're doing wrong with their kid. And so she always likes to praise them of something that they're doing right with their kid, no matter how small it is. It just really helps with those relationships. The administrator said to make them feel as a valued part of the team and involve them in any decisions that are being made about the students. If they think they want to change the decision, involve those parents in that. Give them a phone call or bring them in to the school and see, hey, we need to make a change here, and we want to know what your input is. And said it's important to include them in all those meetings that you may have and keep them updated. Just make them make them feel a part of the team and a part of the education of their child. How do they work with the regular ed teachers with students with special needs? The parent said basically he does a lot of communicating about the needs of the student and the accommodations. And he said basically what happens in most classes is the teacher teaches the class and the para, since they're in there, and then the para reteaches the student. He didn't always like that way, but he said that's basically what each class does. The special education teacher indicated she was from a district where they had core team meetings, so the core teachers and special ed teachers would meet a couple times a week, and those discussions were important to kind of see what's going on in the classrooms. She said it's important to try and understand the perspective of the teachers, but at the same time advocate for her students. That's what she's there. She has to advocate for those students, and a lot of times it's a give and take relationship where they both have to be able to change their approach for the greatest good of the students. And that's what she said. It's important to keep the students in mind when making decisions. And the administrator indicated to have the regular education teachers understand that they have to implement the interventions that the team has agreed on. That's a part of the plan, and those interventions are designed to help close the gap that any students may have. And so it's important to get those regular education teachers to implement those interventions in their own classrooms. The advice that they may have for a first-year administrator, the para said to get to know the students, empower them more. He thought it was a good idea to give the SPED students more responsibility. A lot of times he thought that they were used to having really no responsibility. And so by giving them a task to do, it could be a small task, or maybe like a daily task to do, or a delivery that they must do every day, just give them some responsibility of something to do at school. And he thought to treat them more mature than what they normally get. He indicated that a lot of times his kids aren't treated as very mature young adults. And so by treating them as more mature than what they normally get, you're building those relationships. It really helps in forming those relationships with those students. The SPED teacher, she indicated that it's important to listen to the needs of the SPED department and the students. She said that her budget a lot of times is lower than a regular classroom teacher's, but she always deals with the highest need kids, and so just getting the resources is a lot of times really hard for her. And so just listen to those needs, and for an administrator to communicate why decisions are being made, and communicate some budget restraints that they may have, or if they can get something, or why they can't, and to work with them to try to find solutions. She indicated that in the past, some of the best administrators that she's had have been the ones that have come to her and say, this is our budget, this is what we have, and we got to find a way to make this work the most effectively. And so we can't get you everything. What is the most important things to you? And we'll see if we can do that. But try to find solutions to make things work. The administrator said it's important for new administrators to realize that special education students are different than regular ed students. They may respond differently to criticism or different pressure. He said it's important for a school to have an active SIT team that looks at interventions early. The sooner you get those interventions in place, the better it's going to be for those students. And so it's important to have that active SIT plan, or SIT team, and to try to correct those deficiencies as soon as possible. And so implementing those interventions either at a young age or at the beginning of school year is usually the best option. And asking how do you describe the role of special education teacher and the building principal? They said a lot the same here, that communication is key. Good communication about the students. The para also indicated to give useful information to the paras. So a lot of times he said there was maybe one of the special ed kids that he works with, there was something that happened at home, and if he was giving some information, even if it wasn't all that specific of what happened, that say there's some other circumstances going on right now just to be aware of, he said he could have handled some situations differently and been able to hopefully help that student out a little more. The SPED teacher said just, again, always communicate and work together. Said it's really important to keep each other informed, and said that's the best relationship that she's had with administrators is the ones where they kept each other informed. She would always try to keep them informed if she had an upset parent or student, and say, hey, here's the situation, and explain the situation to the administrator, and say, hey, if you get a phone call, this is just kind of a heads up. By doing that, it allows the principal or the administrator to have some background knowledge if there is a dispute of some kind. And she always liked it when administrators cared and checked up on how they were doing and what they needed and if they could do anything to make their job easier. So that's always really, really helpful. The principal said, in many regards, it's a lot of the same as with other regular ed teachers. The focus should always be on the students and the students' success. That any decision that should be made should be for what's best for the students. But he said that a lot of it's the same, again, of the checking up on your teachers, see how they're doing, what he could do to help them out, to make their classrooms more successful. And so a lot of it is just the same as what he does with all of his regular ed teachers. And asking what characteristics they seek in inspiring administrators with regards to special education. The para said to have more specialized curriculum for special education instead of just trying to always catch them up and push them through. He gave the example that in a math class that he's in 8th grade math class, there were students that struggled, that were maybe at a level that was much below the 8th grade, and if he thought more benefit could have come by going from where they're currently at and trying to build it up from there instead of trying to do both the 8th grade level and where they're currently at, and which he said what he thought would happen a lot. The SPED teacher, she said the administration should give boundaries, but also be willing to step back and rethink things. She mentioned again here that it's beneficial, like when she asks for resources, that the principal may sometimes come in and say, hey, we can't afford everything here. We can only afford one thing, so what is the number one thing that you need? And maybe we can get that. She said it's really important for the principal to understand the law, to help catch any mistakes that are made or that are happening before they become much larger problems or legal issues. And said it's important for the principal to be able to mediate disputes and help out with disputes. Said they happen, and so with students and parents. And so if the principals has the ability to help mediate those disputes to where they can find a solution that's equitable for everybody, everyone feels more okay with the situation. He said by far those are the best principals, and they have the best schools and the most enjoyable places to be at. The administrator indicated that compassion and understanding that all students are not the same, to realize that in different situations you're going to have to treat students and parents differently, or have different approaches towards those students and parents. He also said it's important to have the drive to make a positive difference in every student. He mentioned a lot that for a lot of students, the school is the best part of their day, and for others, the school is not the best part of their day. And so the differences of those students and finding a way to connect with those students is really important for those relationships, and it helps everyone in the school then at that point. In the reflection and evaluation of these interviews, there were definitely some common themes. Many of the answers were really similar between the educators I interviewed, and they were especially similar between the special education teacher and the administrator. There were a few differences, but they were mainly limited to the role of a paraprofessional. There was a definitely consensus that all students are unique, and that everyone involved in educating of special ed students should be involved in the decision process of what's best. I mean, each bring a unique perspective, and so by looking at as a whole, you can get the best plan for students for their future and for their success. The main takeaways that I had from this: good communication is key. Communication, all of them mentioned communication several times. All of them mentioned being supportive and positive, and the benefits that can have with the staff and the students. And that I think that more training is needed, especially for the paraprofessionals and to an extent the regular ed teachers. I know that the training that I've received personally on special education has been limited, but it's still more than what a lot of the paras have, and so just more training with everyone is important. The projections for my future as a principal, what I would want to do, I would want to dedicate time for training, preferably at the beginning of the year, a school year, during professional development time or a conference, and if you could use that then throughout the entire year. And I'd like to also make sure that everybody knows their role and what part they play in the common goal of special education. I know that in my own experience as a teacher, a lot of times I don't really know how to use a para in the classroom, to utilize a para in the fullest extent in the classroom. So how could I do that better? And by making sure everyone knows their role and teaching people strategies of how to use each other, I think we could help with the education of the special needs students, and it would be benefit for everyone. And finally, as a principal, I want to make sure that I stay up to date on the policies and procedures of special education. It's much easier to stay up to date and realize that there is a problem than after it's been going on. You may have legal issues or problems that are just much harder to solve. So just by continuing to learn, stay up to date on those policies and procedures, I think you can run a much more successful and efficient school. Hey, thank you for listening, everybody.